Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zhenya, and I have a stack of books here, a really big stack. So that means it's time for a reading wrap up. I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in April. I believe that I read 12 books this month. I have many of the books here with me now, but there were a few of them that I read through the library, or I just have them in another place right now. So without further ado, let's get right into it because we have a lot to talk about. I started the month off very strong with The Conditions of Will. This is Jessa Hastings' newest book. Jessa is already very well known because of her Magnolia Parks books. She also wrote Never, and this is her first standalone romance. So I was very excited to get my hands on it, and I actually posted a video. It's my most recent upload of me going to the book signing and meet and greet with Jessa Hastings and getting this book on the release day. I give some thoughts about the book when I'm reading it. It's like a little reading vlog, but it's not super in-depth. The video is really good at highlighting my thoughts in the moment while reading the book, and now it's a month later. So my thoughts on the book have developed a little bit more, I would say. So in this book, we followed Georgia Carter, and she's been estranged in London from her family for many, many years. However, her father passes away and she has to go back for the funeral. Her family dynamics are, just think like Southern crazy family, but they're all very fractured and they don't really get along. So in this book, there's a lot of surprising feelings, some tension, a will that nobody was really expecting, and Georgia is struggling with some complicated feelings for her younger brother's AA sponsor, and he ends up being kind of the male main love interest, and that's Sam. In London, Georgia's studying psychology, and she's really good at detecting lies, and she knows how to read people really well. Throughout this book, she's using those skills to read her family, to really get a feel of what's going on, and then hopefully keep things from not falling apart completely. My thoughts on the book are that Jessa has a wonderful, wonderful way of crafting characters, and they feel so real, so raw, and they're like a family. You get to know them so well, and you're incredibly invested in the lives of these characters. They are so layered that even the ones that you're not necessarily supposed to love, you still feel very strongly for. Reading this book, it kind of felt like I was coming home. I haven't read the Magnolia Parks books in a long time, and the writing is obviously very similar, and you kind of feel some parallels. There's a couple of crossovers between the universe because they are set in the same universe, but you definitely do not need to read any of her prior books to read and enjoy this one. I think, honestly, this is a great book to start with if you're just getting into Jessa Hastings, because in my opinion, I was sort of comparing it a little bit to her other works, which I wish I wasn't doing, but that's just me being honest right now. But this was different. This was her first time writing a standalone. It was very intriguing to see how she was going to go about it because there's a lot of drama in her other series, and it doesn't necessarily end on a happy note on a lot of the books, but you kind of expected this one to end on a happy note. But you really don't know because it's Jessa Hastings. So I was really on the edge of my seat when I was reading this, and it made it be a very, very enjoyable reading experience. So this is an insta-love romance, and this may not be your cup of tea, but honestly, it worked really well. The romance and the banter really swept me up off of my feet, and I was very invested in Sam and Georgia. My enjoyment level of the romance was honestly at a 5 stars throughout the entire book. I was very enraptured by the Southern drama of the family. Even though it was fun, the writing was great, and I just loved all the characters so much. There were a few aspects of this book that left me wanting a little bit more or made me a little bit annoyed at times, so that is why I settled on a 4.75 stars instead of a 5. The enjoyment level the entire time was definitely a 5 though, but I was being a little bit nitpicky, I will say. One issue that kind of stood out to me was the way that alcoholism was portrayed in the book. I just felt like certain scenes were a little bit off-putting, and maybe that was the point, but to me it left me, I don't know, just a little bit uncomfortable. And then the male main character, Sam, is Oliver's sponsor, and Oliver is Georgia's younger brother. So that dynamic also felt a little bit weird because she's kind of falling for him in a way, and it just makes you uncomfortable, like what is going to happen? This is really going to get in the way of the recovery of Oliver. You can just tell something bad is going to happen. So again, that may have been something that was done on purpose, but it left me with a feeling of kind of discomfort and unease, which was fun, but also, I don't know, it just, that was something that kind of knocked the star rating down a little bit for me. I get why Sam was put in the book and why he was the sponsor, but the execution or something just fell a little bit flat for me. But I know that it had to be that way in order for Sam to be following along the family throughout this entire journey. Those little points being said, this was still a fantastic read. And like I said earlier, I ended up rating it 4.75 stars. It was very close to a 5-star feeling for me. I just think that everyone could read this book. I highly recommend it. And please pick it up if you read romance, or honestly, even if you don't, because this is different than every other romance out there. There's just something special in these pages, guys, and I highly recommend it. Okay, that's enough about this one. I already have a whole video dedicated to it, but obviously I loved it. But anyways, next book. The next book I do not have here with me physically, but it was The Left Hand of Darkness. This is by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I picked this up because it was chosen for a book club read this month. I am really glad that I read it. I'm starting to dabble a little bit more into sci-fi, which I guess I should say this is a sci-fi book. This story follows Genli I, and he is a human that is sent on a mission to the planet Winter, which is a little bit different than what he's used to. Everyone on this planet functions most of the time without a gender. The mission of Genli is to try and get Winter to join forces with the rest of the galaxy and form a bit of a cohort, kind of as a way of civilizing the entire universe, I guess. It's science fiction, and honestly, the beginning parts of it kind of went over my head, so I didn't fully know what was going on until it was further into the story. And if I reread it, I feel like I'd be so much more confident in telling the plot of this book. Just know that there's a lot to it. It's very complex, and Ursula really thought out the world building of this story so well. And I was looking it up, and it seems like this is kind of set in a universe that has other books written in it. So I may be wrong about this, but I think it may have been the 4th book published in this universe. So readers who have read the prior ones may already go in prepared for this story, and it might not be so intimidating to some. However, I think it still worked well as a standalone, but I wouldn't say that this is a beginner science fiction book, honestly. Really, Genli needs to understand the civilization and get to know it on his own basis before he can succeed in the mission. So we're really following Genli throughout the book, trying to understand how the humans on Winter live without a gender, basically, and how they function. This book, the writing was so beautiful. I think that the author has a way of telling the story that's incredibly poetic, but it gets the point across also very well. You don't get lost in the drama of the writing. It's still straightforward, but it's beautiful at the same time, if you know what I mean. It also pulls you into the world slowly but quickly at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a slow buildup, and then you're just deep in there before you even know it, which I really thought worked well for this book. The themes that she explores in this book, specifically gender and alienation and trust, they are still very prevalent today. So this is kind of a timeless classic in a way. Even though I struggled with it, I do think that the world building is genius, and you really get to feel like you're there on this planet with Genli. And I think my biggest takeaway of this book was that it kind of left me with that signature sci-fi feeling, just pondering what if we lived this way, which I think is the point. We're supposed to kind of put ourselves in these footsteps and imagine what life would be like if we functioned like the inhabitants of Winter do. So if you can't tell, I kind of have a conflicted reading experience and feeling on this book. I admire this book and I appreciate it immensely, but I didn't necessarily enjoy my time reading it until maybe the end of it, honestly. Well, not the end, but the second part of the book. I did feel it kind of hard to connect with the characters, even though I appreciated the point of the book and where we were going. I will say that it's a book that I am grateful to have read, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to read it. It definitely felt more intellectually engaging than emotionally gripping. It's kind of difficult for me to rate a book after talking about it like that, because I often rate my books based off of enjoyment, but because of everything that went into it and how powerful the story is, I did end up settling on a 4.25 for this book. So I highly recommend it, especially if you read science fiction. But if you don't, just go into it knowing that you'll need to put a little bit more work and thought into the reading process. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. Hey, the next book that I read this month is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. In this book, we're following a variety of neighbors, and they live in a low-cost apartment building, and it's called the Rabbit Hutch. It's set in a fictional town, I think, Vacaville, Indiana. It might be a real place, but you definitely get the feeling that this town is heavy in the Midwest. You have the Midwest vibes, and if you grew up in the Midwest like I did, it might feel a little bit comforting in a way. This story mainly follows Blandine, and she lives in an apartment with 3 young adult men, and all of them have aged out of the foster system, so that is the main character and kind of the setting there. The book actually starts and ends with a bizarre act of violence, and the in-between is just 1 week in July, and it's everything that leads up that main event. I would say that the themes for this book are loneliness, feeling trapped, and the longing for freedom. Okay, my continuous thoughts when I was reading this book is just like, this is creative writing at its finest. It feels like she was in a creative writing class and the teacher was just pushing her for more and more. And I absolutely love the way that Tess writes. I would love to read something else by her one day because it really enraptured me. It pulled me right in. It's kind of quirky, kind of weird, and the humor in it, it really worked well for my brain. It's not necessarily like laugh out loud funny. It's a bit more of that dry humor, or you need to think a little bit deeper to get the humor, but once it clicks, it is kind of hilarious. I guess I would say it's like inventively funny. I don't know if that makes sense. If you like books that kind of verge away from the status quo, I would highly recommend picking this one up. Honestly, I don't know how to explain the book any more than that. Just if what I said sounds interesting, please pick it up. If you like kind of weird books, pick it up. It was a fun read, and honestly, I could see myself rereading it again one day because I think that it's more than just a surface level book. There is something deeper to it, and the themes are really relatable to me. I ended up giving this a 4.5 stars. Really liked it. The next book that I read this month was The Love Wager. This is by Lynn Painter, and she is really well known for her young adult romance, Better Than the Movies. And this is an adult romance, and you can kind of tell from how the book starts. It starts with Hallie, the main character, having a one-night stand. And after this one-night stand, she decides that it was her rock bottom, and it's time for her to flip the switch and live her life as a full-time adult. One of those steps is finding her true love. So she downloads a dating app. And of course, she ends up finding her one-night stand, Jack. They quickly decide that they're not interested in each other, but they end up talking and they make a love wager, kind of as a competition of who will find their love first. So they always end up talking to each other about their not so great dates. They often set them up together at the same place, and that often leads to them meeting up afterwards to chat about them and get lots of tacos together. Oh my gosh, tacos are mentioned probably on like every other chapter. Okay, so my thoughts on this book. This was cute, and it was fast-paced. However, there was just nothing super special about it to me. But that being said, I honestly don't have any complaints. It was kind of just like another romance book, if that makes sense. It was nice to see Lynn Painter write an adult romance, but honestly, I prefer her young adult writing. At times, it felt a little bit lackluster, I'd say. I did enjoy the banter between Hallie and Jack. I would say that I was definitely invested in their relationship. However, if I wanted to be a hater, I probably could dig into this book a little bit more and tear it apart, but I just don't really care that much to do so. It was fine, and it was a good romance to pass the time, and if you are into books like that, I'd pick it up. Go for it. I gave this book 3.25 stars. The next book that I read was actually a collection of poems, and this was just called Poems by Rainer Maria Rilke. And it was originally written in German, and it was translated by Jessie Lamont into English. Rainer Maria Rilke is probably considered one of the most lyrically intense German poets out there, or at least from his time. His work is from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. The reason I wanted to pick up Rilke is because I heard that he is good at understanding the complexities of the human condition and searching for kind of a meaning of why we're here in a way and how we function the way we do. I don't often read poetry. This was my first time actually sitting down and reading a collection of poetry, and I did enjoy my experience. I don't know if I would do it often though. I think that Rilke's poetry is beautiful and it's a good experience, but I would probably read one poem at a time, slowly over maybe the course of a year or so. I do really like that his poetry feels kind of sensitive and it kind of tiptoes over the nuances of language. A lot of his poems explore themes of love, loss, faith, anything you could think of that has to do with poetry. Honestly, it kind of feels a bit cliche, but they're very beautiful and it worked really well. I feel like my main takeaway from reading this collection of poetry is just ease, that I like to continue to find solace and beauty in the simplicities of being a human, and I think that Rilke wrote very well on that front. So I didn't rate this collection of poetry. I don't really rate a lot of nonfiction or poetry or memoirs. I don't know, I'm thinking about starting to rate them because why not? Why wouldn't I? Hey, the next book that I read this month is Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. Oh my gosh, this book. Okay, so we follow a man who is searching for the deeper meaning of life, and he runs across an ad who takes him to a teacher who happens to be a talking gorilla named Ishmael. Throughout their conversations, Ishmael is sharing his ideas on human nature, what it means to live, typical philosophy questions, and it makes the main character guy kind of question everything. okay, I just didn't really like this book. The reason I didn't like it is because it felt like the author had so many of these ideas that could have just formed into a bit of a manifesto of sorts, but it really felt like he lacked proof to back up his theories. So instead of writing a philosophical work of nonfiction, he decided to make it into a fiction novel where a talking gorilla just says his viewpoint. I would say one of my main critiques of this book is that everything felt so dumbed down and easy to read that it didn't feel meaningful at all to me. Honestly, I would have rather read so many other works of philosophy that are well known and appreciated, and not this. Okay, that's all I have to say about Ishmael. I rated it 2 stars. Some people may really like it, and maybe I'm just being a hater, but I didn't like it. The next book that I read is Stuff You Should Have Learned in School by Michael Powell. This is a nonfiction. Let me just read you the back of it. I found this in a little free library, and I thought, why not? If you spent your school days in a haze and you feel like you're missing some essential bits of knowledge, here's the perfect pocket guide to bring you up to speed. Within these pages are easy-to-read refreshers on basic knowledge in English, math, science, history, geography, the classics, and music. Covering 50 basic curriculum points in 7 areas fundamental to cultural literacy, Stuff You Should Have Learned at School will help you make the center of cocktail conversations, a whiz in the boardroom, and an impressive figure to your peers. This book was pretty good. Everything that it covers, it doesn't go super in-depth, obviously, because look at the size of this book. You can only go so far. But it's pretty good at giving you the general idea of things. There isn't anything that I think shouldn't have been in here, but I also think there's a lot that could have been in here, if that makes sense. And it is illustrated very well. Well, I don't know, it has pretty good illustrations that I guess are placed meaningfully. I don't know. That was a good book. You know, I picked it up for free and I thought, why not? I had fun reading it. I learned some things, actually, that I should have learned in school, but I also knew some things, so that made me feel good. Anyways, those are my thoughts. I didn't rate it. It was a good book. The next book that I read is Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This book is set in a future where humans rely on robots for everything. So it is another sci-fi, and I really enjoyed this one. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. Even though it says exactly what happens on the back of the book, I want you to read this and go in blind. But I will say that one domestic robot makes a decision that kind of changes everything for him. After this robot breaks free, he escapes into a world that is full of robots who are questioning their role and what they are doing in life, and starting to see what humanity, or I guess not humanity, what the world would be like without humans. Going into this book, I was already a bit weary about AI and the potential of a robot-filled future. The main character, who was a robot, was actually surprisingly funny. Not that that changes my views on robots, but it made it a fun read, and I had a good time. I actually found myself underlining so many lines because they were relatable and they felt very relevant to the world that we're living in right now. The book did have a few slower parts that left me kind of dragging and wanting to move the story along, but overall, the plot was satisfying, and I had a really good time reading it. Also, the ending was very satisfying, and I think it left me feeling a little bit more positive about the potential of technology. If you are curious about tech, AI, or you just want a fun read, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. I gave Service Model 4 stars. The next book that I read is The Darkest Evening of the Year. This is by Dean Koontz. The book follows Amy Redwing, and she rescues golden retrievers for a living. However, early in the book, she rescues a golden retriever named Nikki, and eerie events start to happen, such as break-ins and a stalker, and it leaves her carefully guarded life out on the table, and it's starting to unravel. Amy's dark past is starting to catch up to her, and we start to realize that this one, who is always doing the rescuing, may need to be rescued herself. So this is kind of a mystery thriller in a way. And I don't often pick up Dean Koontz, but when I do, it's because my dad gives me one of his books. However, I think I just need to tell him to stop. Honestly, Dean Koontz is undeniably a talented writer. I really enjoy how he builds sentences, but his plots are just a little bit too out there for me. If I was to read the back of this book in a store, it's not something I'd pick up. It's not really something that interests me. However, I did love the dogs in this book. I am a dog lover, and my parents used to rescue golden retrievers, so I loved that aspect of the book, which is why I think he gave it to me. But I don't know, this one just wasn't necessarily for me. It was a good book, and I can totally see why a lot of people would enjoy it, and it really wasn't bad in any aspect. I just didn't fall in love with the plot. Honestly, that's all I have to say about this book. I don't want to bash it because, like I've been saying, it's a good book. But I ended up giving this 3.25 stars. If you really like Dean Koontz, go ahead and pick it up. Why not? but I hope to not read another one of his books just because the plots are not really for me. The next book that I read is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This book released this month, and you probably know who Emily Henry is. She is probably one of the most well-known romance authors out there, but if you are familiar with her work, you may know that she doesn't just write romance. It kind of falls into a literary fiction or women's fiction category, but she does have heavy plots of romance in the stories. So this book follows Alice Scott, and she is bubbly, she's an optimist, and she finally gets the chance to write something that she's been dreaming of. She gets the opportunity to write a biography for Margaret Ives, who is a former tabloid woman. Margaret has actually disappeared from the public eye. However, it turns out that Hayden Anderson was also recruited to write this biography for Margaret, and the two of them, Hayden and Alice, find themselves competing on sort of a 1-month trial to see who will get to write the biography. This is Emily Henry, so you know that at the end of the day, there is a romance in here, and things start to build up between Alice and Hayden throughout this month process. Even though there is a non-disclosure agreement signed between Hayden and Alice and Margaret, they start to realize as they talk that things are not necessarily adding up and they're not getting the same story. So then the book sort of turns into a bit of a mystery. When I was first starting this book, it definitely felt like a crossover of Beach Read by Emily Henry and Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And that's what I was thinking when I was reading it, and when I went back and finished it, I was looking through the reviews and it seems like a lot of people were putting that in their reviews. However, I want to say that while it has those little themes, it is different. The book really is something new and exciting, and maybe it has inspiration from Seven Husbands, but honestly, the main similarity is that you have someone interviewing another, but in the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, you're really deep into the person who's being interviewed, but in Great Big Beautiful Life, yes, you are getting snippets of Margaret's life, but the book really does center around Alice and her life. While the two can be compared, they are different. And if you didn't like the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, you can totally still pick this up. And I don't want that comparison to sway anyone in an opposite direction. This book was meticulously thought out, and the writing really flows in a way that I've come to love from Emily Henry. I will say that in the beginning, I wasn't very interested in Margaret's life, but after finishing it, I don't think that the point was to get fully enraptured by Margaret's life right away. It was really to follow Alice and Hayden. However, there's a point in the book where something happens and you get very enraptured by Margaret's life and you get kind of hooked into the mystery and what's going to happen. And at that point in the book is when I started to enjoy the overall book and not just the romance subplot of it. I really loved the ending of this book, and it's more than just a romance. There's many themes in this book, and I did find myself getting teary-eyed by the mother-daughter revelation towards the end, and I think that it was all wrapped up very well. I highly recommend reading this new book by Emily Henry, and I gave Great Big Beautiful Life 4.5 stars. The next book that I read is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This is a spirituality book, and the aim of it is to help readers move away from the ego and the constant process of overthinking and really focus on the center and the power of now. The book is constantly just hoping that you find peace in the present moment. It's giving you tools to work out a way to do so in your current life. The book is clear, it's conversational, and it follows kind of a Q&A format, so it is very easy to follow. Eckhart Tolle offers insight that encourages self-awareness and presence. I would say that this could possibly be a life-changing book for anyone who's searching for that inner calm feeling. I know that I'll be returning to this book time after time again. It's not just a one-time read, and it's really a tool that I think I could pull from throughout my life to help better it. I really admire Eckhart Tolle's outlook on life and how he approaches it. Many of the ideas that I saw in this book are actually things that I've discussed with my wonderful, wonderful yoga teacher, but it was really nice to see the ideas written out in their own way. I would say that this is a book that I highly recommend for anyone who's dabbling into self-improvement or spirituality. Honestly, anyone can read this book, and there's a lot of power in it. I will constantly be trying to improve my life based off of these thoughts. I didn't rate it, but I highly recommend it. Hey, that brings me into the final book. And this is Humble Pie, When Math Goes Wrong in the Real World. This is by Matt Parker. Technically, I finished this in May, on May 1st, but I read the majority of it throughout April. I only had 15 pages left on May 1st, so that's why I'm including it in this video. No! I just got a phone call and I'm recording on my phone, so hopefully It didn't cut anything out. Let's restart. Okay, I actually really need to call this person back, so I'm gonna speed the review of this one up. This is a good book for anyone who is really into math, kind of a nerd about it, or if you are in the field of engineering or technology. It is really good at highlighting how important math is in the real world and how little tiny mistakes can make a huge difference. We are often dabbling in the realm of math that's kind of further than human knowledge automatically goes. So in order to implement it, we need to be very sure about ourselves to ensure that there are no mistakes. This book covers so many different examples of how math has gone wrong in the real world. Honestly, I'm not going to be able to remember all of them, but I definitely got a lot from the main takeaway of this book, and I could see myself turning back to it from time to time, just to highlight some of the funny ones, honestly. A lot of the mistakes in this book were not earth-shattering, but there's definitely the potential for it. It's important to not only focus on the big tragedies and disasters that take lives, but also focus on the minute ones, because those small ones could potentially lead up to huge issues. This is a nonfiction book. I don't know if I said that actually, but yes, I highly recommend it. I had a great time reading this book, and that's all I have to say. So that is everything that I read in the month of April. If you have read any of these books, or if you want to talk about them, feel free to leave a comment below. Honestly, let me know anything in the comments. If you have any recommendations for me, I'd love to read them. I appreciate everyone who is coming back to my channel and watching my videos. I'm having a lot of fun filming them, and I love to get better at talking about books and not just reading them. So I will see you in the next video. Bye.